Good day everyone. Please welcome the Group 1 for their report. Leader, Joel Patosa. Reporters, Noemi Morata and Mary Grace Estribo. Secretary, Annie Nicole Balderas. Researchers, Welvin Rapista, Sid Claro, Yasa Lastimoso, and Vivian Macaya.
Good morning everyone, especially to our subject facilitator, Ms. Angelica Labanon. So today, I will present to you our first topic and the final term, which is the morality of human acts. So the morality of human acts have 4 subtopics, namely understanding the human acts, the constituent elements of human act, the impediments for human acts, and the factor determining the morality of human acts. So these two, the first 2 subtopics I will discuss to you, and the remaining 2 subtopics will be discussed to you by the next reporter. Humans are said to be unevaluative in nature because whenever a person does something, we find others analyzing his or her attitude, behavior, and commenting it was good or bad, or it at times indifferent. So ethics is here, and it is said to be a philosophical treatise which studies human behaviors and tries to determine whether the act performed was morally right and wrong. So now let's proceed to the first subtopics, which is understanding human act. So what is really human act is? So based on this definition, human act is one which proceeds from the knowledge and from the consent of free will, or in other words, it is an act which emanates from the will with a knowledge of the end or goal to which the act leads. So let's remember that not every action or not every act that human does is typically a human act. For example, a circulation of blood, a heartbeat, it is beyond the action of normal people, and it is considered as involuntary activities. That is why it is not considered or classified as human act. Such acts which are beyond the control of humans are those which they share in common with animals are so-called act of humans. Act of humans then are involuntary and therefore not morally responsible for them. Okay, now let's proceed to the constituent elements of human act. So the constituent elements of human act, it is referred to the inner causes or the constituting elements which generate a human person to undertake a certain act. So the understanding of the human act indicates that there are 2 essential elements which constitutes the human acts. It is namely the intellectual element and the volitive element. So one and the first essential elements which constitute a human act is the intellectual element. In intellectual element, knowledge is one of the important qualities which distinguish human from other sentient beings. It is absolutely true in all situations, and matter might be beyond human capabilities. But we humans can attain truth, and that not all truths are relevant and undeniable facts, as epistemology will have established. The human act is voluntary when its different elements and its implication are sufficiently known by the agent and the doer, prior to the operation of the will. This process is knowing entails certain important conditions. First, adequate knowledge of the aspired object. Second, attention to the action by which the particular object is to be pursued. And the last, judgment on the value of the act. So it is also required that one evaluates the action undertaken in its concrete nature as a desirable good or undesirable evil. So such an appraisal includes judgment on the moral or ethical value of the act. Furthermore, the goodness or the badness of a particular human act is adjudged only under those of its aspect which are sufficiently known. For instance, a person who robs and kills a person not knowing him to be his brother, he is guilty of criminal injury but not capable of offense of fratricide. However, one should not presuppose that we have full knowledge of the act and its application every time we undertake a human act. There is still a room left for mistakes. What we affirm here is that with right effort, the person can have sufficient knowledge of the object and its other consideration which are essential for the making of the human act. The second essential element of the human act is the volitive element. Another important characteristic which sets apart the human person from animal is that of voluntariness, or what we commonly designate as free will. So it is the task of the intellectual to conceptualize the good, to propose it to the will as something desirable, and to be judged and suitability of the means in its attainment. The volitive dimensions points that the will can freely make a choice of the concrete object in which the good is sought. Thus, we would hold a person morally responsible for his or her action. We assume that the act was done freely, knowing and willingly. The idea of responsibility would seem then to connote and presuppose that of free will. One must note that anything that is object of the will we call the thing willed, but not everything that is willed is necessarily an effect of the will. So for example, the setting of a house on fire, which is not caused but desired by someone, is something willed but it's not the effect of the will. So thus, when what is willed is both the object and the effect of the will, we call it voluntary. So let's proceed now to the process involved in voluntary act. It involves a dynamic process. Voluntary action has its advent in the mind. So it begins with a feeling of want or a craving of a desire, which is either real or ideal. Such an impulse, though as a certain extent painful, is mixed with pleasure which arises from the anticipation of satisfactions of this craving by the attainment of the desired object. The person also has awareness of the means that are required to attain the proper object. So in a simple action where there is no conflict of motives, so the choice is easily made and the desired action is performed. However, in our daily course of living, many of our actions are of a complex nature, which often involves a conflict of motives, thereby causing difficulty in a matter of choice that eventually delay a decision and perform of the act. Hence, when it's self-controlled with divergent and competing motives, the mind experiences a challenge generated by conflict of motives. So in order to tackle this, the mind deliberates on the merits and the demerits of the different courses of the action that are available. So after weighing the advantage and the disadvantage, the mind chooses a particular motive and a particular action to achieve the end. So this act of selections of one of the motive to the exclusions of other results and decisions. The decided motive is subjectively evaluated as the strongest motive among the others, so the decision phase is often converted immediately into actions and the decision is actualized. However, at times the decisions might be postponed for a future fulfillment, in which case there is scope of resolution. Resolution refers to the capacity of remaining committed to the decided motive. The state of decision or resolution gives way to the actual performance of a bodily action, which is technically designated as a human act. The undertaking of the external body actions produces changes in the external world. Certain of these foreseen consequences, whereas many others are unforeseen consequences.
For the next topic, I will discuss about the impediments for human acts and the factors determining the morality of human acts.
For the explanation, I will be using English and Filipino language.
Impediments for human acts.
In the process of performing a human act, the individual might encounter certain obstacles, which do not nullify the human act and make it involuntary, but diminishes the imputability or culpability of the individual, thereby making him less responsible for the particular act. Impediments o humadlang sa mga aksyon ng tao. Some of the main impediments, which might affect either the intellectual or the volitive constituent or both together of the human action, are the ignorance, passion, habit, and fear. Ignorance. These to a great extent affects the intellectual dimension of the human act. It is elucidated as lack of adequate knowledge in an individual with regard to the nature or moral quality of an act one is performing or proposes to perform. Ignorance or not enough knowledge in a certain thing or situation will result in the failure of your action. Ignorance is mainly of two categories, which are principal ignorance and invincible ignorance. Principal ignorance. The former is explained as that ignorance which cannot be dispelled by reasonable diligence a prudent individual would be expected to exercise in a given situation. Such ignorance almost renders the act performed as involuntary, and consequently the individual may not be imputable for the act, for what is unknown cannot be the object of illusion. Principal ignorance ang tawag sa mga bagay na hindi mo alam pero gumagawa ka ng paraan upang malaman mo ito. Halimbawa, hindi ka marunong gumawa ng attendance link para sa inyong gagawing webinar. Kaya nag-search ka sa Google kung paano gumawa ng Google Form upang ma-send mo ang attendance link na inyong gagamitin. Sa principal ignorance din ay hindi ka nagpapadalos-dalos sa iyong mga hakbang o desisyon. Iniisip mo ang mga posibilidad na resulta ng iyong mga gagawin. On the other hand, invincible ignorance, which could be eliminated with the application of reasonable diligence. Here, the agent has not put enough effort to gain the required knowledge, and as such, the concerned person is culpable or imputable for the act performed under such type of ignorance. Sa invisible ignorance, ay wala kang alam pero hindi ka gumagawa ng paraan upang malaman mo ito. Halimbawa, nasa isa kang kritikal na sitwasyon. Bali, gumawa ka ng paraan na hindi iniisip ang anumang resulta na iyong gagawin kaya naiuwi ito sa failure. The next impediment is passion. It is often connoted as a powerful or compelling emotion or feeling, for instance, an experience of strong hate or sexual desire. It is said to be a strong tendency towards the possession of something good or towards the avoidance of something evil. Kapag na-addict ka na sa iyong passion, doon na lang mabubuhos ang ating atensyon at wala na tayong oras sa iba pa nating responsibilities. Kaya, dapat matuto tayong balansihin ang lahat ng bagay dahil kung hindi mo makontrol ang iyong emosyon, sa passion na lamang natin tayo mananatili at wala ng oras sa mga importanteng dapat gawin.
The more the intensity of the emotions, the less the capability for making balanced and objective deliberation.
Passion is considered as an obstacle to human act. One can enumerate two main kinds of passions, which are antecedent and consequent. Antecedent passion refers to passion elicited without the consent of the will. Here, the person might not be fully responsible for the passion, and as such, this culpability is much less, if not fully absent. Ito ang ating passion, hindi nakakasira sa atin, pero nagbibigay ng epekto sa ating actions. Next is consequent passion. It is within the control of the will. Therefore, the agent is responsible for the result of the passion and as such, imputable for the act. Ito ang ating passion na hindi nakakasira sa atin pero nabubunga ng ating kapahamakan. The third impediment is our habit. It is an acquired tendency for doing something as a result of repeated practice. It may be voluntary or involuntary, depending on whether it was imbibed with consent of a person or without. Usually does not render an act non-human, because do they exert certain coercion, they can be overcome by a committed effort. Habit o nakaugalian natin na nagiging hadlang sa ating action. Halimbawa, nakaugalian mo na maligo araw-araw, ngunit isang araw ay sumama ang iyong pakiramdam. Kaya pinigilan ka ng iyong ina at pinagsabihan na huwag maligo. As such, imputability of acts from habit increases or decreases depending upon the effort exerted. And the last is fear. It is defined as the shrinking back of the mind on account of an impending evil, considered to be difficult to avoid or even impossible at times. It may be grave or mild according to whether it is caused by a grave evil, whose avoidance is rather difficult, if not impossible, or only by a mild evil, which can be easily avoided. It is characterized as highly grave when it exercises great deterrence on an average person. For example, fear of killing. It is relatively grave when the threatened evil is generally considered as objectively slight but scares a particular person, subjectively depending on the person's emotional disposition. It hampers the use of reason and as such destroys voluntariness. In general, fear does not fully destroy the voluntariness of action, but merely reduces its graduation, and as such, usually lessens its culpability. Only in extreme cases, when the highly grave fear totally impairs the two constitutive elements, the act done out of fear may be regarded as involuntary.
Factors determining the morality of human acts.
Most of the moralists agree that to judge the goodness or badness of any particular human act, three elements must be weighed from which every act derives its morality. Mga factors na makadetermine kung tama o mali ang ginagawa ng tao. They are the object of human act, the circumstances contextualizing the human act, and the end or the intention of the agent in performing a human act. The first factor is object of human act. It is that which the action of its very nature tends to produce. In other words, it refers to the effect which an action primarily and directly causes. For example, the object of setting fire to hut of a slum dweller is to burn, whereas the end might be revenge. The object is usually regarded as the primary factor for moral judgment of a human act. Second, the circumstances contextualizing the human act. These include all the particulars of the concrete human action which are capable of affecting its morality. There are such things as the person involved, the time, the place, the occasion, which are distinct from the object, but can change or at times even completely alter its moral tone. Lastly, the end or the intention of the agent in performing a human act. The end or intention of a human act is the purpose that prompts one to perform such an act. Every human act, no matter how trivial, is done with some intention. It is the reason for which the agent performs a particular act. A human act to be morally good, the agent or doer must have a good intention. He must want to accomplish something that is good in one way or another. The references.
That's all for our report. We hope you learned something. Thank you for watching. God bless us all.